Hello and welcome to another episode of It's Not That Simple. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that touches everything from politics, climate change, war to economics, and that is the topic of geography. We're going to unpack it with an expert who's written several books on the topic. Tim Marshall is a renowned British journalist, author, broadcaster with over 30 years experience covering wars and news in over 40 countries. So he's got an extensive experience of covering news around the world. But what sets him apart really is his ability to make a link between landscape and power and showing how geography influences the decisions of nations and leaders. Tim is the best-selling author of Prisioneiros of Geography, a landmark book that explains how rivers, mountains, borders, and access to oceans shape the fate of countries. He's gone on to write other books as well, such as The Power of Geography and The Future of Geography, that take us even further into understanding our world and not only what happens on the planet, but also out in space. So we're delighted to welcome Tim Marshall on the show. Tim, fantastic to have you on the show. So much to discuss, so pertinent as well, the topic of geography, unfortunately, with all the conflict we have on our planet at the moment. But let's start with our kind of staple question to set the table, so to speak, which is, why is geography not that simple?
Hola, Pedro. Obrigado pelo convite para falar.
Very good.
Geography is simple in the broad brush terms and the concepts that you can paint around it. And I would argue that geography is only one of many factors which underpin the things that have happened in history and the current affairs now and the choices that we have. Only one of the factors, I'm not a geographic determinist, but I think you can make very strong cases that geography has shaped why countries are the shape they are, why they are weak or strong, and why they behave in the way they do. And I think there are some really blindingly obvious and simple examples. But then you obviously why it's not so simple, you then have to get into the hard detail.
Okay, well, let's start doing that. Let's start getting into the detail of the conversation as well and of geography. I mentioned some of your books, and in them you make quite a powerful case for the importance that geography obviously has played in international affairs and state development throughout time. How deterministic is geography in a country's success, after all, in your view?
As I said, one of the major factors is what you have. And my own country, United Kingdom, it is an example. You look at a map of the UK and you'll see it has a jagged coastline. And a jagged coastline means it usually has deep water ports. So if you've got deep water ports, you can build bigger ships, which can go further and are more powerful. To do that, you need wood. Well, you did in the old days. And of course, what does the UK have a lot of? Wood, very hard wood, oak trees. Long rivers, so you can get your goods to the deep ports and then ship them out. Now, if you've got a country that has rivers that are not navigable, and many of the African countries are like this because there's so many waterfalls and rapids, and then if you can get to the coast, it's a very smooth coastline, and you can't have a deep water port. So immediately, you've got these two differences. One can build and trade, and the other one cannot. So you can do that with pretty much every country. Then there are the much more negative aspects to this. Warfare. Russia, I believe one of the main reasons it behaves the way it behaves is because of the North European plain. North European plain is flat. It narrows as it gets to Poland, and then it widens out again as you approach the two centers of gravity, Moscow and St. Petersburg. And if many hostile armies have come through that gap, and they have, then the Russian psyche will try to plug the gap, which is why Poland disappears from the map sometimes. It's on the superhighway of European militaries. So plan B, if you can't control it, is you have a buffer zone in front of you, which is Belarus and Ukraine. And so if Ukraine decides it doesn't want to share Russian influence, it wants to ally itself with its Western neighbors, Russia reacts. Doesn't justify this, but it partially explains it.
Talking about Europe, in Prisoners of Geography, you talked about the continent and how intricate it is with all the borders that it has, all the languages, all the different cultures. And I wanted to ask you about Portugal and get your opinion on how our location on the western coast of Europe and having so many powerful nations to the east, how that affected our history and our development.
In a number of ways. I mean, you look at when you were at the height of your powers, which was at the beginning of the age of exploration westwards out into the Atlantic. You were perfectly positioned for that, and you have some good deep water ports. I think Lisbon is one of them. And so you were able to leverage that power and move out there into the world. But you found it difficult to keep up as the rest of the world caught up. For example, you don't have a river access to the Mediterranean for trade. You don't have river access up northwards. Even if you can move your goods round through past the Picos de Europos and then try to go up, you only have this narrow corridor in Spain for trade because the Pyrenees cuts you off. So you're not you're peripheral in a geographic sense. You're not peripheral in a sort of family of European nations sense. But where you still have a lot of potential power, and to your advantage, is another way of looking at Portugal. Your EEZ. Under UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, 200 miles, nautical miles, from your coastline is your EEZ, your exclusive economic zone. Only you can fish there. Only you can explore for minerals and gas. Right. So that actually makes you the third biggest country in the European Union, if you look at it through those terms. Your EEZ is actually 20 times the size of your actual land mass.
Wow.
So if you can exploit that, and you've done very well on the fishing, you could argue overfish, but that's another issue. But I don't think even to this day, Portugal really leverages its power in exploring for minerals in your huge EEZ, and also exploring your potentials for wind power and sea power. You could be a major player in those two things in the future. So, all that geography is absolutely part and parcel of your past and your future.
As far as being a major player and living up to its potential, I do want to talk to you about work ethic, because not just from a stereotypical standpoint, but obviously Southern Europe, Northern Europe, different culture. Max Weber has a famous theory that he bases on the Protestant work ethic versus Catholic work ethic. I wanted to get your take on it, and also obviously the role that the geography can play in it as well in shaping the culture and the way in which people work.
I have issues with this Protestant-Catholic divide. I'm not ruling out the possibility of it, because different cultures do behave in different ways. And Max Weber, one of the sort of seminal names of the pioneers of sociology, but he was German. Well, I've been to Germany many times. I've been to Munich in Bavaria, home of the car industry, one of the most successful car industries in the world. Mm-hmm. And Bavaria, I think, is a majority Catholic area. North Rhine-Westphalia and the Saarland, both centers of German industrial power that built the modern state. I think also, again, either majority Catholic or strong Catholic. So, I don't see how that fits. Northern Italy and southern Italy are very different economically, and yet they're all Catholics. So, although there may be a kernel of truth in it, overall I disagree, and it's more on the geography. You look at Northern Europe, look at the Gulf Stream. The Gulf Stream comes across the Atlantic, but it funnels towards more the north, which brings with it rain, which brings with it farmland. And the northern European countries have much, much better soil and better farmland than the south. They've also got many more navigable rivers, flat, long rivers, with which to then trade with each other and grow their economies. Whereas if you look at the south of Europe, there's less rain, the soil is much worse, you get earthquakes, and famously, of course, Lisbon. And it takes, when you get something of the catastrophe of the Lisbon earthquake, it takes decades to recover from that. And also the coastal plains. The south is actually slightly more mountainous than the north, and your coastal plains are narrow. So you come off the sea, quite a narrow coastal plain in which to grow crops, and then up come the mountains. Whereas the northern countries have much wider coastal plains in which to grow agriculture. So for me, I think geography is far more of a factor. Last example, again, would be Spain, for example, because the Pyrenees always had issues trading with the richer north. And so a lot of its trade looks south. But of course, you're then trading with areas which are much, much poorer. So put it all together, I would come down on the side of geography.
Yeah, and geography also influences climate. Climate has a lot to do with the conditions that we all have around us when we want to work or we want to go outside and do something else.
Yeah,
I lived in London 7 years, so I know perfectly well that
we had a heat wave. We had a heat wave just recently. I mean, can you imagine? It got to 29 degrees. I know you. This is a chilly spring day to you, but I moved slower. We all moved slower. It's completely natural. It doesn't mean you're lazy. It just means you acclimatize and you cope.
All right. Well, let's see if we were going to have a look at the atlas, and we're going to pick a country that was most blessed geographically for its location and its landmass and its profile of landscape. Who would you pick has been a country or countries or a region that has benefited from its geography, and who hasn't? Who's been damned by it?
Thank you, as we say in cricket, for an easy slow ball.
Okay.
Because there's one standout example, and it's the United States of America. But again, this is where it's simple and yet it's complicated comes in, because it's only the United States of America, once it has achieved coast to coast and a unitary political and cultural system. So, get to the States, East Coast, jagged coastline, deep water ports, beautiful farmland all the way along it, with rivers connecting to the coast. Once you get over the Appalachians, all the way from there, right across to the Rocky Mountains, this is the Mississippi River Basin. It's possibly the best farmland in the world. Great rainfall in most of it. And the rivers are long and flat, and the rivers connect down to the Mississippi, which flows down to New Orleans, one of the biggest and best ports in the world. Get over the Rockies, and you're at the Pacific Ocean. So what you now have, once you have a unitary state with a single economic system and a single monetary system, and broad brush, a single culture, once it's stolen the land and parceled it out to everybody, you have a two-ocean power. The only two-ocean power in the world can project power in two oceans simultaneously. If anybody wants to invade you, they've got 6,000-mile supply line from that direction and a 3,000-mile supply line in that direction. And everyone in America's got guns. Don't invade America. Really bad idea. Above you, you have Canada. Well, they're not going to invade, are they? There's only about 10 of them. And below you, you have Mexico. which is a middling power, but it's about 200 miles of desert before you get up to the Rio Grande. So what you have is a unitary, massive state with a single culture and political system, relatively stable. And I would add one thing, as well as the geography and the culture, you have to factor in the politics. After they'd stolen the land, a lot of it was parceled out to people, which gave people a stake to work. In Latin America, what you did was take the old system, the feudal system almost, of landowners and peasants, and the landowners took massive, massive chunks of the land and kept it, and had pretty much serfs and peasants working on it, which is a little bit like the old communist system. You pretend to, they pretend to pay us, and we pretend to work.
Okay, well, let's take a little bit of a look at some of the predictions that you've made. And in your book, The Power of Geography, you focus on, I believe, 10 areas that have the potential to become hotspots in the future due to their geography for reasons such as climate change, energy supply, competition for other resources, ethnic strife, places like Australia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Greece, Turkey, Sahel, and Spain. Can you help break that down for us? And also, why did you include Spain in there? Because it seems a little bit like the odd one out.
Yeah, I understand why you would say that, because it goes under the radar. Power of Geography was on from Prisoners. Prisoners was the big countries: China, the continent of Latin America, the continent of Africa, India and Pakistan, USA, Russia, etc. So Power wanted to look at one tier down from that. So Saudi Arabia, clearly for me, was going to be in the news and will continue to be for its purchasing power, for its continuing fossil fuel energy power, and as a linchpin in the Middle East. The Sahel, and sadly this is still coming true, and I think it may even get worse, because it's absolutely newsworthy. You know, it's the coup belt. You've had coups in Mali, Chad, Sudan, Niger, Burkina Faso, and I think this is going to spread across to the coastal countries, sadly. And of course, there's a knock-on effect, and climate change is involved here, and the knock-on effect is the movement of peoples.
Right.
So I could go through each country. Australia, because of its absolute linchpin location in the Indo-Pacific. But you're right, Spain is the one. I wasn't arguing so much that Spain is going to be in our headlines all the time. It's more, I think people underestimate its strategic location. It is one of the top 20 military powers in the world. It has got lots of deep water ports, Corunna in the north, Cartagena, Cadiz. And then, this is the key point, the Canary Islands. So go back to the EEZs, the exclusive economic zones, but also Spain's position in NATO and as a European power with its locations in the Canary Islands and the bases that it has there, and also the cables. This doesn't make many stories, but the underwater sea cables that Spain has connecting the Canaries both to Spain and to Europe and across to Africa are really very, very important. So I just thought that Spain goes under the radar a lot and is a growing European power. I don't think there's any chance of it growing to become as important as Poland. For me, Poland is going to emerge it's going to be an equal to France and Germany. I don't think Spain will reach those heights.
Why do you say that, just quickly, on Poland?
Polish economy, population, industry, tech, science, AI, military, because the whole weight of NATO has shifted northwards because of the Ukraine war.
Right.
And Poland is now front and center in NATO's thinking. And if there is no NATO, and I think there will be, I just think Poland is going to be one of the three key European countries.
Okay, interesting. It'd be fair to say that a lot of the most powerful nations have been now competing for some unexplored areas. Antarctica, deep sea, outer space. Do you feel that this kind of need for expansion will continue among the superpowers, and why?
Sadly, yes. And not just the superpowers. I mean, the UAE has sent a probe to Mars. It's because of resources mostly. But if you want to get romantic and in a sort of philosophical sense, and I try to resist that, but don't always succeed.
Yeah.
There is something insatiable about the human curiosity. And we've never seen a mountain we didn't want to know what was at the top, or a stretch of water we didn't want to know what's the other side. And it's the same with space. And so we are going to space, A, because of that insatiable human curiosity, but we're also going for the minerals. For example, the South Pole, the lunar South Pole, has many, many minerals, titanium, lignite, the things we need for 21st century technology, which is why there is Space Race 2.0 going on. And it mirrors the tensions here. We have the Artemis Accords led by the United States, who are going up as a bloc. And then we have the Chinese-led bloc, Russia, junior partner, Iran, North Korea on their coattails. And they are in competition for what's going on. Then if we come back down to Earth, if you look at some of the hotspots, you look at the Lobito corridor, which links Central Africa and Zambia and the Copper Belt and the DRC, and it links it through that old Portuguese colony to the Angolan coastline, so that the Americans and Europeans can get the copper out for your iPhone or whatever. But if you look at the map, there's another four-lane highway being built in the other direction towards the Indian Ocean coast of Africa to get it all to China. So there's this huge competition going on. That's just an example of something that's going on right across Africa. Or if you look in Latin America at the lithium deposits, and this again is an interesting point because this is why I'm not a geographic determinist. I think there's the other factors. The key player in Latin America for lithium is Argentina. But Bolivia has got more lithium than Argentina. But are you going to invest in a very unstable state, Bolivia, or are you going to invest to try to ensure your supply of this critical mineral in what is a far more stable state, Argentina?
Interesting. Climate change. How much do you think it's going to affect the future of the success or not of several countries as temperatures continue to rise in light of their geographical positioning?
Yeah, I mean, we could do half an hour on that, Federico.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Well, the plus winners and losers. Scotland, wind power, yeah. Solar power, not so much.
No.
Including England, actually. Portugal, you can leverage both wind and solar. Saudi Arabia is already embarked in a very long-term plan to wean itself off its absolute dependence on fossil fuels, and it's moving to diversify the economy, including into renewables, because of course it has solar power. There's going to be winners and losers. Russia will lose things like solar power, but it'll win in trade as the Northern Sea route, which comes across the top of Russia, and as the Arctic ice cap melts, it will get more trade coming through its area. So there's going to be winners and losers all over the world. But I think an equally serious point is the effect on politics. If you look at Latin America, some of the coffee growers in the high ground, they've just given up. And they come down to the low, because of climate change, they come down to the low ground. There's no work there, so they keep moving. And where do they move to? They move northwards to the United States. And this is one of the many, many reasons why President Trump got reelected. The arrival of people, partially driven by climate change, there's other factors to it, which have led to that border pretty much closing. So I'll go back to the Sahel. Climate change is pushing people to move. They move north, they come through Europe. Look at the effect it's had on our European politics, including in Portugal, with the rise of Well, they used to be regarded as extremist parties. Some people do still regard them as extremist parties, but they are becoming more mainstream. Germany, 35% for AfD. Sweden, something similar. France, 35% for what used to be the Front National. And this is happening right across the continent. And the numbers have not peaked. And they are partially driven by climate change, which of course pushes poverty, which pushes violence, which pushes people. So this is not peaked, and it's, we need to have very adult, compassionate, but grown-up conversations about what we're going to do about it.
Last question before we move into our quick fire. You've stated that great ideas and leaders may change the course of history, but you've also made it abundantly clear that leaders will always be somewhat constrained by geography. What advice would you give the current world leaders then?
Yeah, I mean, I do subscribe to the idea that great leaders can shape and move in directions. But of course, those great leaders were propelled or clawed their way to power through what was happening. I mentioned Trump, for example. They are products, not causes always. I would say cooperate a lot more than you are doing. I believe we're in a new era. We're not in the post-Cold War era. We had the Cold War, my generation, then we had the post-Cold War, your generation. We're now in a new era that just doesn't have a name, but it is an era of great power competition, which has come roaring back. And those are dangerous times. So a lot more cooperation, try to salvage as much as we can of the international institutions. I mean, the UN is, weakening daily. NATO is fraying at the edges. The EU, I think, is fraying at the edges as well. So go back, try to get back to more cooperation, try to get back to more negotiations on the big issues, including nuclear weapons, which has gone out of fashion, but is going to come back into fashion, and get back to as much consensus as we can. I think it'll be difficult, but, cooperate as much as you can. It's going to be bumpy. So I mentioned the new era, Pedro. I'll try not to be too long on this, but all eras obviously come to an end, whether it's Pax Romana, Pax Americana, whether it's the concert of Europe after the Napoleonic Wars. And when they come to an end, things get messy and things get bumpy. And while we try to get used to these new parameters, the new way of doing things, we become very unsettled, and it affects our politics. Well, we're right in that at the moment. But we usually come out at the other end and things calm down again, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, no kidding. Speaking about leaders actually leads in quite nicely to the first question of our quick fire. So in one word or one sentence, I'd like you to answer these. So what is one personality trait that a good leader could really benefit from having, and why?
Wisdom, but of course, how do you define that? So let me have another guess. Historical perspective, because with that, it gives you pause to think, if I do this, here's some lessons that I can use to judge what will now happen.
Okay. What is the biggest challenge humanity is facing?
I'm torn between climate change and population movement, but they're connected.
Right.
And the reason is I think the challenges of both are going to challenge our liberal democracies, which have been, to me, in my mind, the most successful political system for managing complex societies so far.
If you could change one thing right now in the world by magic, what would that one thing be?
Solving climate change. Turning water into fuel. There you go.
And what is the most important learning of your life/career?
That is hard. I'm really sorry.
You can pick one. I mean, you've traveled a lot, you've seen a lot.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a negative one, but I think when you understand it, it helps you understand what's going on and also put into measures. Identity matters so much to people. It doesn't matter to the flyover class, the people that fly from New York to Los Angeles and, never land anywhere in between. It doesn't matter to the European class, who are the anywheres, who feel they can just take their skills and go anywhere.
Right.
But this is not a siren call for nationalism or anything like that. It's just a plea for understanding that people's identity so matters to them, and you have to take that into account when you're putting into place policies.
Yeah, and I think we've seen that in the results of various elections in recent years.
Listen to those people. You don't have to agree with them, but listen to them.
Yeah. Tim, really enjoyed having you on the show. You have broken down a lot of what you've written in your books, and also regarding the topic of geography, helping us understand why it's not that simple, but at the same time saying that it is simple really when you look at it from a geographical standpoint. So absolute pleasure, Tim. Thank you so much.
Obrigada. Adeus.
Very good. Tim Marshall joining us on another episode of It's Not That Simple. Fascinating, really, for those who love history, for those of us who want to understand how geography plays such an important part in the history and also in the present and future of what could be the major decisions to be taken on our planet. Definitely a show that sheds light on a lot of the details and factors that could influence it. So hope you enjoyed it. See you again very soon.